I was reading about this study this morning where they were asking the question, if you make your primary focus to become more happy, will you become more happy? And they did the study across like 4 different countries, like the US, Russia, and 2 Asian countries. I can't remember which ones they were, but they found that everywhere else apart from America, if you focused on trying to become happy, you would become happy. And then they were like, well, why? Why do Americans not become more happy? And I would say it would be the same for Australians as well. Like, just we're similar enough. And one of the possibilities they put forward for this discrepancy is, in the East, they're very collective focused. It's about society, it's about the community. If the community's happy, I'm happy. But in the West, it's more, who gives a shit about anybody else? It's all about the individual. It's about me. Like, if I'm unhappy, it's my problem. I've got to fix it. I've got to do something about it. And they found with this study that that's like fundamentally flawed way of thinking. It's just not going to get you there. Even if you work your entire life trying to make yourself happy as an individual, you won't get there. You'll just make yourself more miserable, because we take it for granted that, or we fail to notice that if everything around you is miserable, you're probably going to be miserable too. But they understand that in the East. They know that a child can't be happy if every other child in the class is miserable. Like, it's not a sustainable happiness. So yeah, this whole thing's showing me that the community-based approach is a really good thing. And I'm thinking of it in the frame of the obstacle course that we just did. But it was only a small team, but it was still enough of an experience to get everybody outside of their own ego, outside of their individual self, and into that collective identity where it's like the whole team needs to feel safe. The whole team needs to feel confident. The whole team needs to be happy and feel strong and confident. Like, the whole team needs to make it through the whole course. And that was like the motivation behind everybody. Everybody got into that collective identity. No part of the team could be isolated and left behind, because that would make everybody else sad, because we expanded our sense of self, our sense of who we were, to include everybody that was with us. And we did that with my 2 brothers and my dad last year, and a couple of dad's mates, and it was really cool. But what I want to really do is expand that circle of concern to include everybody. I think that's a really key thing to like healing everybody. There's the golden number of 150 springing to mind. When a group gets to about the size of 150, it needs to split up into smaller groups, because it's hard to keep track of each other. But we don't necessarily need to have permanent groups, you know. Like, you could have all these different things going on, and the groups could be totally temporary. I think that's what we need to move towards now, with just the sheer volume of human beings that are living in our communities. We can't, the 150 rule, like, we can't just split everybody up into groups of 150. I think the future of our evolution as a species is to adapt, to be able to move in and out of these these group systems, and to be able to form them and dissolve them at will, like we did at True Grit. Like we can just create this group identity within like 10 minutes of running the course as a team. It solidifies, and that becomes our identity. And then at the end, we all go home and it dissolves. There's still like traces of it. There's still a sense that we're all connected in some way, which is very comforting. And imagine like if you did a bunch of things like this and you had these connections to like a bunch of strangers and different people that you'd cooperated with, how much more calm and settled you'd be in your daily life. Just, they're not even there anymore, but you can still remember a time when you were like a part of something bigger than yourself, and it was nice and it was good, and you felt that empowerment that comes with being a part of a cohesive unit. So where am I going with this? I think that if we can figure out more ways as a society to make it possible to connect more, it would be really good. But what even is stopping us from doing it? Like, nobody's stopping people from doing what we did on the weekend. It's just like people don't know that it's good for you. Like, people don't know how good it is for you. And people are like stuck trying to fix problems, like surface level problems, with band-aid solutions. Like, they're trying to get motivated and they're trying to find inspiration to do something with their life, when like that is the thing. Like, you go and you participate in your community and you do this stuff. Like, it's the medicine, and it's the like what you're aiming for at the same time. The medicine is in the action of like being, of doing. There's another part of that 150 rule that groups, once they get to about 150, they need to break it down into smaller groups or split up. I think we only have enough mental capacity to store 12 high-value relationships and all the information about those 12 relationships. And that's because of a similar thing, because to store those 12 relationships, you've got to store data about those 12 people's relationships with the people around them, and like all the connections between those 12 people and yourself, and like all of this information. It all adds up really quick exponentially when you're actually talking about having a close relationship with an individual. Like, so if that just seems like something that we're going to have to evolve out of as well, because we can't have like just your family unit and that's all, like your closest 12 people. We need to be able to move through relationships much more securely and like do this creating and dissolving group identities. We do it with other forms of matrices. Like, a matrix is just a consensual illusion that we all share. So like, an example that I love is when we set up a soccer game in the backyard and we use a couple of shoes for the goalposts, and if it goes past the veranda, it's out. Like, you know, that kind of thing when you're a kid, or even when you're an adult on the beach. Like, set up some shoes and like make a fake soccer field. That's a matrix that you've created. Everybody agrees that that's what those things mean, and the boundary's not there, but we all agree that it exists. Even on a real soccer field with the goalposts and everything, like, you've got goalposts and you've got actual lines marked. It's still just arbitrary stuff that's there. It doesn't mean anything to anybody who didn't know what it meant. It only means something if you know what it means. That's the boundaries of the field, and if it goes out, it means this and all that stuff. It's like a matrix, and we do it all the time in so many different ways. We just like create and dissolve realities, and they're completely real to us. It's like that, but it's with your identity. Like, you team up with a bunch of people to achieve a common goal, and even the goal of True Grit is like a matrix. Like, the rules of it and everything, it's all made up stuff. Like you don't, if you went there and you weren't a part of it, you would just walk through the bush and you like, none of it would mean anything. You might be curious, but like getting through like all the 33, 34 obstacles or whatever wouldn't be on your agenda. It wouldn't mean anything to you. But we can create these realities, and we can create and make these things real, and we can adopt identities and make these identities real as well. And we should be able to do it. I feel like a really healthy, mature human being, like if everything goes right for you, should be able to identify with any group in a fairly quick. You should be able to adapt fairly quickly and feel that you're a part of that group, and that group's a part of you, and like they're all an extension of you, and you can really actually feel that, you know, when you're in one of these groups or these communities. And you should be able to just dissolve it after that and let it all go and reform your identity around the next immediate thing that you need to form your identity around. Even to just like throw another perspective into this identity stuff that I'm talking about, like when you get in your car and you drive, your identity expands to be like the whole car, and if you really think about it, like you feel like you are the car. You don't really think about you sitting in the seat at all anymore. That's completely gone, and you just like really get into the headspace where you are the car, because that's what you're responsible for. So you're thinking like, these are the sides of me, like this is what I'm identifying as the edges of me, and they can't run into things and all that sort of stuff. It's all automatic, all this stuff. If you overthink it, you drive yourself mental, realizing that everything is just like it's not what you thought. But that's also healthy to do that, to question it, but in your own time. So like, yeah, I definitely think we've reached a point where this needs to be like where people are at. Like they need to be able to understand that these matrices are all dissolving and forming and dissolving and forming, and we're able to do that, and we can walk away from one and just be like, no, I'm not playing that game, and we can form these groups, these identities, and like participate there, and like all this complex stuff is going on. Whether you don't need to be super conscious of it or understand it super deeply or anything. Like you just need to understand that it's happening and it's good for you. It's just a natural thing that needs to happen. If you can't deal with these kinds of things, like your identity expanding to include things and then retracting to exclude things when it's no longer relevant to you to be identified with these objects and these groups and these individuals, and if you can't like deal with like the different matrices in your society and the different rules and structures and everything that go with the matrix that you live in, if you can't deal with all that stuff, that's what we call like mental illness. It's like you're not synchronized with the experience that everybody else is synchronized with. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're the one that's wrong, which is a really tricky part of all of this, like the human experience. Because a lot of the things in society that you're butting heads with are actually the things that are wrong. It's probably not you, but change happens so slowly and gradually. It's not any time that change tries to happen quickly, like there's a like radical revolution or something, it usually creates more harm than good. So there's this whole thing like, yeah, like you've got to figure out how to cooperate and synchronize with the matrix that you live in. But at the same time, keep questioning everything and keep trying to change the things that don't work for you on the level that you're actually capable of changing them. Don't get concerned with things that are completely outside of your control and just waste all of your mental energy thinking about how fucked up the world is, because you won't get anywhere that way. You really need to work on the level that you're at. And you can see like, I try to practice what I preach, you know, like I'm doing this. I'm working on the level that I'm at. I'm trying to connect with more people. I'm trying to like teach the people around me and like share these experiences with the people around me so that we all come to our own understanding. Like, it's one thing for me to just tell people shit and like make these videos, but like with my family and stuff, like, and the people that came to True Grit with us, they actually had the experience. And there's things that you can't communicate with words that have been understood by everybody who was there, and each individual had their own experience and they learned different things. And there were people that came with us that would have learned things that I haven't even realized yet. And there's like, we all had our own little realizations, and I think you really got to learn by doing it a lot of the time, like being a part of it and like observing the experience as you're in it. So yeah, that like we need to, what we really need to do at the end of all of this, like everything that I'm talking about here, we need more people to think about it deeply and understand it deeply, and then ask the questions like, how can we help the people that haven't naturally adjusted to the matrix? Like, how can we help them plug their personal development holes, which is another term that I've used before. Like, how can we help people get to a point where they're synchronized with the matrix as it is, and then they're able to start to look at it and tweak it and change it and figure out like what works better, because nobody's going to make any meaningful change to society or the world that we live in while they're not in sync with it. If you don't understand it in the first place, then you don't know what to do. You don't know how to make it better, because you don't even know what you're looking at. It would be like trying to put out a fire, or like trying to make a fire go away and not knowing like what it is at all. Like, you go like try to swat it with your hand or something, and like you just burn yourself, that kind of thing. Like, or thinking like you need oxygen while you're underwater, and just thinking like I should be able to breathe in here, and you just can't, you know. Like, that's what it's like for somebody who wants to change the world when they don't understand what's going on in the world in the first place. Like, we really need to help people get to a place where they understand what's going on objectively, or as close to objectively as you can, and then they can make their decisions about what they want to focus on, what they want to dedicate all their time to. Because then once you understand, like, or even get like the slightest grasp on like how incredible and complex society in the world is, you really immediately begin to appreciate like how much effort and time it would actually take to create any meaningful change. Like, you understand like, oh, okay, this thing that I want to do, this thing that I want to impart on the world is going to take me 10 or 20 years. If I'm lucky, I might like scratch the surface and set up a foundation for future generations to continue my work. Like, if you really want to do something big and meaningful, that's what it's going to come down to. So that's my bunch of insights for today. And it all began with a study about, can you become happy by trying to become happy? Sort of what I've been doing, but I have been taking the collective approach. I'm interested in how can everyone be happy. It was sort of an individualistic approach anyway, because I live in an individualistic society, like in the Western society. But just by sheer luck, I stumbled upon the secret of like, if we focus on everybody else, if we have a happy community, then we're happier. So all the people around me have been focusing on like how I can make their lives better, and then like there's this community forming of all these people that are becoming more happy, and that's how you actually become happy, not just by yourself with a bottle of pills in your own home, like trying to shut out all of the problems and just focus on material shit that brings you pleasure and makes you forget. Like, it's not the way. It's been proven scientifically, which is kind of like nothing. I can prove, like, science, man. Even my empirical investigation, that is this documentary, I'm just like taking all the raw data and telling you what I make of it. Somebody else could do the exact same thing, ask the exact same questions, end up with totally different raw data and tell you a totally different interpretation. And that's why like it can never end. We have to always question everything. There's always got to be people that are starting from scratch and looking at everything and going, I don't know about this. Like we all got to come to our own conclusions. We've all got to discover our own truth, because no one's going to tell you the objective truth. No one's ever going to tell you like the secret to life, or like anything. Like no one can even tell you the simplest shit, for sure. No one can even tell you if coconut oil is good for you. That's how ridiculous reality is. Like no one knows anything. And if they ever try to tell you that they totally do know everything, then they're probably just having a moment and they feel like they're on the money. But then there'll be an uncertainty next week and they'll be questioning everything all over again. Or maybe they actually have deluded themselves into believing that they've got the answers. Or maybe somebody does have the answers out there. And maybe it's a limiting belief that I have that nobody can give me the answers, all of the secrets to the universe. There could be a dude down the street who knows everything. I doubt it though. And I doubt that most of us are going to have the privilege of speaking to such a being. And even if you did, you probably wouldn't recognize him.